Hey guys, welcome back to Author Journey. My name is CJ Anaya. Today we're going to focus a little bit on writing and specifically on subplots and what they are, how we use them, how we write them, what we do with them in conjunction with our own protagonists and plots. So we're just going to get started. Plot versus subplot. Okay, so a plot and plot layers are several narrative lines that are experienced by a story's main character or protagonist. So it's important to know the difference between the two, mainly just because it's the name of each one and you don't want to get mixed up, but they're basically pretty similar. They just apply to different characters. Okay, a subplot is a narrative line experienced by secondary characters, okay? Now, a narrative line is essentially made up of a problem or problems that take several steps to resolve, and it becomes more complicated as the story progresses. This is also kind of known as upping the stakes, if you will. So as your protagonist plot continues on, you're going to make things more complicated and a bit more difficult for them to reach their main goals. And that's the same thing with subplots. The thing about a subplot is obviously it's not going to be the main problem of the story, because the main problem of the story is reserved for the protagonist and their plot line. Okay, so you don't necessarily want to overshadow, have your secondary characters overshadow your main character, because if that's actually happening, then maybe you need to sit back and consider that your secondary character should be your main character. Just a little heads up there in case that is a problem you're experiencing. So I want to give you an example of just one subplot line within the Healer series, okay? So a secondary character in the Healer series is named Angie. She's Hope's best friend, and Hope is the main character. And Angie, her subplot is all about her own personal gift as well, because Hope has the gift for healing, but Angie receives visions of how a person will die when she touches them, and it has to be skin-to-skin contact. And so she wears gloves a lot to prevent that from happening. Problem number one, any physical contact with an individual lets her know too much about that person's death. Okay, so we talked about subplots and a narrative line essentially being one problem after another. Like it's complicated. It gets more complicated as the story goes. Okay. So here's another problem. She isn't always able to save the people that she comes in contact with, because not everyone obviously is going to die the next day. She may see a vision of someone dying and, I don't know, in their sleep in bed when they're 70, those types of things. But sometimes she's going to come across people who, may be in danger, may die of an accident, or, or someone does them harm or something like that. Within a week or two, or maybe a month, and because her visions aren't very clear all the time, she isn't always able to prevent those things from happening. And a lot of times she makes decisions, her own personal decisions of who to date and how to behave based on who she's trying to help at the moment, which causes her to come across as very flighty, because she will essentially bounce from one guy to the next, and what nobody realizes is that she's dating them or she's hanging out with them to save their lives, and then she pulls back and is withdrawn and into herself. And so she is a very complicated, layered character in that respect, because of what's going on in the background, because of this gift that, problem number 3, she doesn't tell anyone. She has this gift, she doesn't tell anyone about it, and it's causing her to deal with it on her own, which is another reason why she's very misunderstood, and why Hope is so good for her, because they both have gifts that they're not talking about. You would think that as best friends they would share them with each other, but they don't, which is unusual for best friends. But a lot of it has to do with the desire to protect each other, and a lot of it has to do with the desire to feel like that is something they have to take on themselves, and they don't know how to share it with others. Okay. Problem number 4, she can never grow close to anyone because she will always know when and how they are going to die. And yet she can be close to Hope, because Hope is the only person she's ever encountered who she can't see Hope's death. She doesn't know why, but for whatever reason, she can't see how Hope is going to die. And so that creates a bond with them and allows them to be friends. And so their plots intersect in that sense. Okay, so weaving subplots within a plot. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because there are a lot of other things that I want to talk about in a different lesson, but just the basics of what you need to consider. What does a secondary character's subplot have to do with the main character's plot? Okay, how is it similar and how does it conflict? Because you don't want to create a subplot for a secondary character that really has nothing to do with the main story. Obviously, any background issues or backstory, those types of things are going to affect and influence how this person reacts and relates, but their main conflict and problem, it needs to push that story along. It needs to further the story. It can't just be something random that comes out of left field that doesn't really add to the main issues at hand, okay? Or there's got to be a way that they weave together and interact and conflict or support one another in some way. Okay, so Hope is also in the business of saving lives by healing people. So she relates with Angie because they want to save people. They just do it in different ways. Their gifts are different, but there are similarities in the challenges that they face both physically and emotionally with what they do, which is why they're so compatible to being friends on so many levels, okay? And why journeying together throughout the book becomes so important for them to have that friendship in place. But here's the conflict, okay? Angie can give Hope warnings concerning a person's death to help that friendship survive, or she can keep those facts hidden from Hope for the overall good of the group. Because Hope, her conflict and one of her problems is that she can save a person whether she's supposed to or not. Like, she has full control and power over that. It's her choice whether or not she saves them, even if she knows she's not supposed to. And Angie is aware of this and knows that someone is going to die, and it's her choice to let Hope know about this when she knows full well that maybe that person is supposed to die. And it would be best for the overall good of the group as a whole that Hope doesn't interfere with the laws of God and nature and death, really, and abuse that power. And so by not discussing it and not talking about it, it can cause problems in their friendship. So, these are the kind of conflicts that you'll see and how these plots and subplots can weave together. And then there are always, multiple narrative lines within this, because while Angie has this gift, she's also dealing with a different problem. Angie does find someone whose death she can't see. And it's not just Hope, that's a friendship, but as far as love and fulfillment goes, she can't do that. And then Hope is locked into an arranged marriage. So Hope, on her plot line, which is part of the main conflict in the story, is that Hope is being told that she has to be with someone that she doesn't necessarily want to. She has no choice, okay? And so we're going to see how the similarities of these narrative lines come together. So they both love someone they can't have. There's a similarity there. It brings them together. There's some solidarity on that front. But the conflict is Angie is in love with Victor, the only man she can have a normal life with, because she can't see how he's supposed to die. And obviously, I'm not giving you all the answers to this or why, but just the bare basics of what's going on. Hope is destined to marry Victor, okay? So Angie wants to be with this person, but Victor is supposed to marry Hope. And if Hope doesn't marry Victor, then the veil between the living and the dead can't be healed and the world will end. And so it's not like Hope can take a step back and say, hey, my best friend wants to be with Victor. It doesn't work that way, because the fate of the world hangs on whether or not she unites with Victor and gets married, and they're able to heal the veil between the living and the dead together based on their collective powers. And so, this is just another secondary plot line or problem that Angie is dealing with, and that is somehow intertwined with Hope as well, okay? So the more subplots you have for your secondary character, or at least more lines of narrative or even more problems, the more intriguing the story is, especially when weaving those subplots in with plots and plot layers, okay? And it can get tricky, so you need to be careful. You need to do it one by one, just so that you don't feel like the story is snowballing out of control and that there's just so much going on that you can't keep it, together. So here's your writing exercise. And the thing is, you don't have to keep any of this, but it will help you to get the juices flowing. It will help you to think out of the box a little bit, get it creative. You can storyboard things, you can write stuff down and just kind of spread it out before you and see where you're at and where you want to take it. But just make a list of your novel's secondary characters, and they need to be secondary characters that will have the biggest impact on the story, okay? If some random restaurant owner makes an appearance for 1 or 2 scenes, don't include them or their plot line unless it has something very relevant to do with the main story. Don't include their subplot unless it has to do with the main conflict, or it affects it or impacts the book in just a ginormous way. List the main problem, conflict, or goal that each secondary character is facing. And then list 3 main steps that will help your character solve their problem, their conflict, or attain their goal, okay? What 3 things absolutely have to happen within the story that you just cannot do without? They've got to be told for this resolution to be attained. And then list 1 to 3 ways that each problem, conflict, or goal directly impacts the plot line of the main character, either negatively or positively, because that's going to help you, weave it in a little bit, but that's also going to help you to make sure that what you're creating subplot wise is relevant to the book, okay? And that it intersects with the main plot. Outline the secondary character's story, okay? So you're not only outlining your main character, which I know can take a lot of work, but you're going to outline the secondary character's story. What is your secondary character doing to solve his or her main problem while the protagonist is solving their own main problem, okay? What things are happening in the background? What things need to occur? Can you add more problems? If so, repeat this process with each character and each problem. So, Angie, she's got a gift. She, can see how someone's going to die. It prevents her from having a normal life, from being close to people. And yet, it also allows her to find someone that she can love and care about. And yet, so there are 2 problems right there that are woven in with Hope's issues and problems, and they're both similar and they both conflict with each other. So that's just 2 examples of things that that are in the healer. So don't go crazy with it. Write as many as you can. Dig as deep as you can. But at the end of the day, even if you have like 15 to 20 crazy subplots going on, like don't actually insert all of those into your story unless you're writing just the most epic series in the world, or possibly a TV series or something like that. Because that would I think that would be very difficult to handle and to write, and it could be too much for your readers as well if you can't keep it together and keep track of it. So usually you just want to have the main plot for the character, and then a couple secondary characters with subplots involved. I wouldn't juggle any more than that. And then you weave your plots and your subplots together. And I'm going to go into more detail really about how you can do that in a different tutorial. But basically, I wanted to help you understand the difference between plots and subplots, protagonists and secondary characters, and how different narrative lines can be written, what they should include, similarities, conflicts, and that they do need to have to do with each other. The plot and the subplot need to be able to intersect at different points, and I will go into much more detail on how to do that. But this is just kind of the basics right here. So I hope that this was helpful. I know that sometimes when I think about writing a story as a whole, I get very overwhelmed. If I can break the process down into different steps and little parts like this, where I say, okay, today I'm working on the main conflict or the main problem of my protagonist, and then the other day I think, okay, now I'm going to talk about my secondary characters and write them and see how that interacts with the protagonist. When I can do these little steps one by one and just kind of slowly outline different aspects of the story, it makes it so much easier, just these bite-sized pieces. And so I like to take these little tiny fundamentals and break them down for you so that you can grasp these fundamentals and get them, because being able to weave an entire story together, write an entire story, you really have to have the have the fundamentals down. In anything that you do, all of your writing techniques, you've got to understand the basics so that you can build upon those. And this is definitely one of them. So if you have any questions, be sure to ask me in the comments below. If you liked this and you thought this was helpful, please click that like button. I appreciate it so much. And then for sure subscribe if this is your first time here, because I have a lot of videos to share, a lot of help to give, and I'm very excited to help new authors and intermediate authors and advanced authors even, you know, anyone who wants to write a book, I'm there to help. So thank you so much, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.